Good morning. It is an honor to join you today, having vets on both sides of my own family, but also both sides of the family I married into, including many Indigenous vets. I want to start by thinking about how everything that we're surrounded by, we made possible. God created the earth, and then through the gift of our free will, gave us an opportunity to create great beauty, and gave us an opportunity to create great inequality. This church can be recognized as a thing of great beauty, a monument to peace, and yet there's a focus on soldiers. And so it becomes important to understand the historical location, the context, the feelings of those who built this magnificent space. This church was created after 7% of our nation participated in World War I, and 1% of those participants died. It was a war that was thought to end all wars, and so it would be the last time that soldiers would be represented. It would be the last time that a nation would be left grieving. And I'm reminded from a meditation practice I'm doing recently that grief is an expression of love. We do not grieve what we do not care about. And so these representations of soldiers, these representations of war, at the time were built by young widows, were built by heartbroken parents who mourned their sons for many days, who wanted no one to forget the sacrifice, but also thought no one would ever make it again, who sought to remind us the cost of our wars, as does today the red poppy, to remind us of a nation and nations within our nation's sorrow at the loss of their vets and their soldiers. We lose touch too often with what something means because we look at it from today's eyes, from today's views. And there's no time that I think that this has done more damage than the line, "Turn the other cheek." An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to them also the other. Well, there's a great book on this by Walter Wink, and he explains a better translation of do not resist an evildoer would be to say, do not resist an evildoer by using evil or violence. It would say to stop violence, resist peacefully. If anyone strikes you, turn the other cheek. Now, I've been in places in Manitoba and in Ontario and in Trinidad where turn the other cheek was a reason to not get involved when somebody was experiencing domestic violence, where turn the other cheek was a reason not to challenge a racist joke, where turn the other cheek allowed for the people who are like us to continue to spread values that we do not agree with, to be passive. But if we put it in the historical context, turn the other cheek meant something radically different. It was a call to fight for peace by being peace. Just like this monument to peace, we must understand that it meant a different thing in its own time. Jesus lived in a right-handed world. It was before toilet paper, so your left hand had other purposes. The hitter, to use their left hand, would have been being unclean. This carried with it great social cost. You would be an outcast if you did unclean things with that left hand, or did things that you should only do with a clean hand. So the hitter would have used their right hand. The only way to strike someone on the right cheek with your right hand, if they were your lesser, is to do it with an open hand. This was often used, a slap, This was often used masters against slaves, and unfortunately in this time, husbands against wives, and Romans against Jews. To strike again if I turn my other cheek, you must close your hand, or you must use your left and admit that you are being unclean. To strike with a closed hand if you are my lesser carries a fine in this time. Gives the slave a day of freedom in this time. Just as we hear, if you are told to walk a mile, walk 2. It wasn't quite our labor laws, but there were rules about how much you could make a slave do. And if your slave walked that many miles in a day, they also got a day of freedom, and their owner could be fined. You would never strike an equal backhanded. And so to say to turn the other cheek is to say, recognize me as also fully human. With this new understanding, to slap again, in accordance with law, you would have to do it in a way that admitted that what you were doing was not right. Or you would have to do it in a way in which you would suffer a repercussion. To turn the other cheek is to prompt, is to say, try again, and recognize the first action was also this wrong. It forces the master to cross the line. This is an action that Jesus calls on slaves to do to fight oppression. Jesus tells slaves they must, at every opportunity, fight their own oppression. Imagine what Jesus wants of us who carry privilege. A privilege in a society which we are not necessarily trying to create that privilege. We did not seek it. It is not something that we purchased, and yet it gives us purchase power. A privilege that we are told is just the way it is. And yet, everything we are surrounded with, we created. God gave us that ability. We create the beauty and we create the inequality. This is not the way it must be. In sociology, we call accepting what is now without question presenteeism. It's a prejudice against our ability to change the future. And it's a forgetting of the ways that the now has been drastically changed by people being fully human, by ordinary people. Sisters, brothers, and siblings on common ground. Fully human, ordinary people made it possible to end slavery. Ordinary people walked out in 1919 to give us workers' rights. Ordinary people hid Anne Frank from Nazis. Ordinary people fought for civil rights. Ordinary people got the right for queer folks to marry. Ordinary people said they would be idle no more. Ordinary people started the Me Too movement for all survivors. Ordinary people. Fully human people. I could go on with their accomplishments. Ordinary. I am ordinary. You are ordinary. And yet in our ordinariness, there is an unlimited power. If we can be extraordinary loving, if we can be extraordinarily committed to the betterment of one another's lives, if we can commit to peace by being peace, the work of peace building, the work of wearing the white poppy, the work of pushing for transformation of the way we understand war, this is what Jesus calls us to do. Whether Jesus for you is someone you have a relationship with, or Jesus for you is a part of a great story saga about justice in our earth and in our world. My Jesus was a radical anti-capitalist peace activist. My Jesus called on us to share all we had. My Jesus called on us to change our swords and our weapons into things that fed people and nourished people. He sought to heal a broken world and he called on us to take care of all who we knew and those we do not know yet. And yet, too often, Christianity is used to divide. It's used to harm. It's used to justify the very things that Jesus tells us not to participate in. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. We do not resist evil by doing evil, and this is what it means to turn the other cheek. It means that we resist evil in peacefulness. And yet, that Christian name, that force in the world that tells people they're not good enough, do we let it go? Do we let go of that identity, or do we reclaim it? Do we learn from our queer community how to take back power and redefine what a Christian looks like? We're doing that in Winnipeg through One Just City. We're building an ecumenical movement with the secular community that invites them to work on justice with us, to build a city where all are loved, all are cared for, all have enough to eat, and a community where they belong. We do this by unifying small soup kitchen outreach ministries of the United Church together so that they can be stronger and so that they can love the underloved, work towards reconciliation, grow individuals' ability to see themselves as having worth, and have and be a part of building an inclusive community. To me, this is what a Christian looks like. In my notes, I have a hashtag you can't see. So every time I say it, just think hashtag, this is what a Christian looks like, if you know what that means. This is what a Christian looks like. Getting arrested to stop a pipeline with our Indigenous relatives. This is what a Christian looks like. Walking Palestinian children to school so that they are safe. This is what a Christian looks like. Visiting Trinidad to try to undo the racial tensions created by our colonizing Christianity. This is what a Christian looks like. Tithing their income in donations to charities that are serving the poor, while working for systems change that would end poverty. This is what a Christian looks like. Challenging oppressive systems, not by violence, not by the master's tools, but undoing the master's house with peacefulness. This is what a Christian looks like, not accepting peace that has no justice, because really that's just oppression under stealth. As Beth said, the peace of Christ involves showing up for each other, showing up in celebration, but showing up also in the hard work of making sure that we carry out the mission of peace. We are the hands and feet. This is what a Christian looks like. Look in a mirror if you identify as Christian. And then think about the ways that you are being peace in this world. This is what a good person looks like. Look in the mirror, no matter how you identify, and ask how you are being peace in this world. For as much harm has been done in the name of Christianity, it is to us, Christians, to undo the harm of residential schools, the harm that our privilege continues to have and to do in this world. I am a woman. I am a survivor. But I am also, as much as I am Me Too, safer as a result of the fact that my skin privileges me. And Indigenous women and girls in our country are missing or have been murdered at rates that are 5 times those of other women. This is Canadians' issue. This is not an Indigenous injustice issue for which we show up as allies. This is a Canadian injustice issue for which we show up both as cause and, hopefully, as cure. We need to undo the language that dismisses Indigenous women's leadership and power. We need to undo the systems that tell us, or that let our government decide in 2005, that this wasn't a big enough issue to continue researching. We need to leverage that privilege, as Jesus calls us to do, with peacefulness, but actively and aggressively at every opportunity to undo oppression in our society. This is not our burden. It's our calling. Because it's on us. It's on ordinary people to be the hands and feet of God and Christ in this world. But more importantly to me, it is on ordinary people to be the loving heart, to show all that they are deserving of love, created in love, meant to be loved. It is on us ordinary people to build the next great thing. Amen.